Good evening. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I'm calling a source of value in the humanities. In some sense, the humanities discuss the notion of value a lot, but usually this is not monetized value. That's a separate argument. I'll return to that a little bit later on, but I'm really going to try to make a case for the monetary value of the humanities in high-end white-collar and professional jobs of the mid to distant future. And this has really come to my mind recently through a number of reports I've been reading and discussions I've been having with think tanks who work on employment trends and leading multinationals engaged in professional services. So, just to take an example from something from an organization called the Institute for the Future, which is a private institution in the States, but as far as I can judge, a respectable institution with buy-in from many leading multinationals. And they say that they see the attributes of future white-collar workers as these. I'm just going to read this off my screen here. Sense-making, novel and adaptive thinking, social intelligence, transdisciplinarity, design mindset, the ability to work in virtual collaboration, cross-cultural competency, new media literacy, and so on. Now, I think it's striking that there's very little there that one could say was what one might call a traditional technical education that would require a traditional scientific or technical education. There's one slot reserved for computational thinking, but all the rest of it, I think, is more what one might associate with the humanities as studied at higher education. There's another organization in our country here in the UK called the Council for Industry and Higher Education, and they too speak in such terms about what the managers and the innovators and the business and industry leaders of the future are going to need. By the way, I shall put all the references that I refer to at the bottom of my blog, and you can click on the links there to get the get the references in full. So, how has this come to be? And does this mean that we no longer need scientific innovation and technical innovation to drive our economies forward? Well, I am certainly not going to argue against science. I do believe that in the current economic model, whatever we may think of it, and I'm going to put aside alternative economic models for this, but in our current economic model, we look to science and technology to drive economic growth. I think that's undoubtable, really. Um, so we need brilliant scientists, brilliant technologists working at the cutting edge to drive forward innovation. But as the metaphor suggests, really, the cutting edge can only be so small. Excuse me with my fingers here. It's hard to work out which way around we are. It can only be very, very tiny number of people who work at that point. Only a few people can work at the cutting edge of something. And so what that means is as you fill out the pyramid below that, this sort of area here, you need lots and lots of people who understand the science, who are competent in the science, but are able to make connections across the science, across the technology, to innovate using existing technology to bring that value to the economic sphere, if you like. And that value can really be monetized. But I suggest that the skills needed, the knowledge needed as you move down that pyramid, become increasingly humanistic. So this is not to knock science and technology. On the contrary, I think we must have a system in which our scientists are strongly supported and indeed in some ways left alone to innovate. In a university context, I would say, and there need to be technologists again free for blue skies thinking and to innovate. But they can't be that many of those people. And the question really is in how many such experts do we need of that type, and how many of these other sorts of people do we need with these cross-disciplinary, much softer, more humanistic skills to bring that technology and that innovation into the economic sphere. And it seems to me that what the people who think about these things are saying is that we do need more in the way that might traditionally have been associated with the humanities than we might have thought. Now, I just wanted to return to that argument about the more traditional argument of valuing the humanities, which is given by people such as Martha Nussbaum and here in the UK, James Ladyman, which is a powerful argument which I actually also am happy to be to agree with, that the value of the humanities is an inherent value. It's hard to live as a human being without the sorts of things humanities give you, and if you scale that up, if you like, it's also good for society that people study the humanities. Um, James Ladyman makes the very nice point that there are very few dictatorships in the world with thriving humanities departments, but those are not they're not arguments about economic value, and therefore they've been harder to make, particularly now as times are getting tough. We're getting more and more instrumentalist about our education. That may be a bad thing, as I say, and we may want to get behind Nussbaum and Lederman and what they're saying. But I think it's striking that perhaps we can have another argument for the humanities, which actually takes on the instrumentalists at their own game and says that, look, people are saying these humanistic skills are actually of value in a monetary way for the future. So, excuse me looking down at my side here. I've got a little crib sheet of things I wanted to cover. Finally, I want to say really why I don't think this is that surprising in a way. Why humanistic skills, the sorts of things you would learn studying the humanities, might come to have more and more economic value. And it's simply that as the world gets more and more amenable to being susceptible to algorithms, amenable to being algorithmatized, if you forgive the horrible word, that is, computers can do more and more of what we as human beings have done for centuries, millennia even. Things become automated, databases start to run not only our social lives through things like Facebook and so on, but increasingly involved with businesses through marketing, perhaps even in the way we relate to government. Then what is essentially human will have more and more value to other humans, because I do believe that Pache, some grand vision of the future that the singularity guys have about us all turning into computers of one sort or another. I do believe that what is essentially human will be of value to humans. And therefore, what is essentially human is what you learn about when you study the humanities, and that will have increasing value. So I don't think it's that surprising in a way we're seeing this, but I don't think it's yet properly recognized by government and policymakers when they think about the higher education of the future. Now, I must admit that the full economics of this, of course, is far from played out. And anyone who's heard me in the last year or so talking about the future will know that I am a bit uncomfortable talking about the future. I just think, the future's what is hard to predict, right? But to some extent, I have to think about it, and I'm happy to do so in a wider frame. And as I say, I don't think that the economics are fully worked out, but it does seem to me that we're pointing again at the humanities as something of not only inherent value, but something which will have increasing economic value. Finally, just to blow my professional trumpet for a moment, this excites me because of what we're doing at work. And again, these documents point to a type of graduate that has fluency and technical expertise, but who has also a great many other areas of skill and knowledge, such as cross-cultural competency, such as an ability to communicate in a virtual environment, understand new media, all the things I mentioned before. And I think these do point to a growing need for and probably an interest in by students interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary degrees. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I hope to do another of these vlogs very soon. Thank you.